Length, length, strength, and control. Today, we're going to talk about this concept that sits underneath almost everything we do in training and rehab. That's the length, the strength, and the control. A lot of people think pain or movement limitations come from being tight. I know that you've experienced this, I've experienced this, but often the definition around what we associate as tight is wrong. In short, the solution to being tight becomes stretch more, foam roll more, massage, mobilize more. Sometimes that works, maybe only temporarily, but many times and often it doesn't. The problem isn't that your body necessarily lacks range, it's that your body doesn't trust the range that it already has to a degree. When your brain doesn't trust the position, it protects you by limiting access to it. So the real question that we need to ask is not just can your body get there, but also can your body control itself once it gets there? That's when we talked about flexibility versus mobility. That's where length, strength, and control come in. First being length. Length refers to the amount of range of motion available in a joint or tissue. This can come from muscles, tendons, joint structure, or surrounding tissue. Length is basically asking how far can the body go into a position, right? For example, how deep can your hip flex? How far can your shoulder reach overhead? How much ankle dorsiflexion do you have, right? That's the frontal range. The important thing though is not that more length is always better. It's not. Every time, sometimes I do these movement assessments and people want to have like the best range. It's like, it's not always optimal, right? Your body doesn't need unlimited flexibility, but it needs enough length to perform the tasks that you ask it to do specifically. If you have the length required for your life and your training, then adding more flexibility isn't necessarily solving anything, right? That's why it's very based off of your goals. It's going to be very different than somebody else. In fact, sometimes chasing more range when you already have enough based on how you want to live your life can actually make you less stable. So, step one is determining do we have enough length to access the position that we want and need? If the answer is no, it's simple. We work on improving that range. If the answer is yes, we move to the next piece. The next one is strength. Once we know that length exists, the next question, it makes sense, is strength. Strength is the ability of the tissue around the joint to produce and resist force within that range of motion. Okay, this is where one of the biggest misconceptions in training shows up. People often build strength only in the middle ranges of motion. If you never train strength near the end of your available range, your brain will start to interpret that end range as unsafe because it's not used to being there. Maybe it's never been there, right? So, what happens then? Your nervous system creates tension or restriction to avoid going there. This is why you'll often hear phrases like strength is gained in the range it's trained. If you want to own a position, you have to expose your body to load in that position. Doesn't mean aggressively or recklessly, but progressively with intention. Progressive overload. When tissues experience appropriate stress, remember stress isn't inherently bad or good. Sometimes stress can be the best thing that we need to get out of pain. So when tissue experiences the appropriate stress within their available ranges, they adapt. That's how they get stronger, they get more resilient, and your body becomes more confident at using these positions. And lastly, strength is great, but we need control. So the third piece is control. Control is your nervous system's ability to coordinate and stabilize movement through a range of motion. This is where mobility really lives, right? Remember how I said flexibility is your end range and then mobility is your ability to control that end range, right? So this is where mobility lives in control, or control lives inside of mobility. Mobility is not just flexibility, it is strength expressed through range with coordination. Control means that your brain knows where your joints are in space. Your muscles can do or can activate in the right sequence, and you can move through positions smoothly without compensating. Without control, even strong and flexible bodies can feel unstable, right? It's how you see like sometimes the big people walking around that are super buff and you're like, oh, they're super strong and all of these things. And then you see them do certain things like try to run or ride a bike and they're like not balanced and unstable, right? Strength and flexibility isn't everything without control. Instability is one of the fastest ways the body starts creating protective tension. Your nervous system is constantly asking, do I trust this position? It's why in later lessons we're going to learn about breath work and nervous system regulation. Getting out of pain and living an active life is more than just physical, right? It's also your nervous system, and does it feel safe? Does it trust the position? If the answer is no, the body restricts movement. If the answer is yes, movement becomes more smooth and efficient, right? So a lot of, you being here is putting trust in me to help guide you through this. When you trust something, your nervous system down regulates, and often it gives you more access to positions that you didn't know that you had. These three work together. When they work together, we get a simple progression, right? First, we check length. Do you have the required range? If not, we improve it. Then we develop strength within that range. We expose tissue to appropriate stress so that they can adapt. And finally, we build control. The coordination and stability required to move confidently. When all three of these are present, movement becomes easier. Makes sense. Positions that used to feel tight are suddenly available. Painful movements often become tolerable. Again, isn't that the goal? And the body eventually stops guarding the same areas all of the time. Prolonged periods without pain. If someone is struggling with a squat, the first assumption might be, my hips are tight, right? You've probably said it yourself. But once we assess, we might find something different. Maybe they actually have enough hip range to squat, but they don't have the strength to control the bottom position. So their nervous system creates tension to avoid the position. If we only stretch them, nothing changes. If we build strength and control in the ranges that they already have, the squat improves. This is why assessment matters, because the correct solution depends on the correct problem. So when you're thinking about your own movement, remember these three pieces: length, strength, and control. Your body doesn't just need range, it needs the ability to own that range. When we progressively develop all three, your joints become more resilient, your movement becomes more efficient, and your body feels capable. That's the goal of this process, not just moving more, but moving with confidence and control around what we do. That's freedom in our body without compromise. It's why you're here. It's what we're working on. Let me know what comes up for you. This lesson will carry you through the rest of the week. There'll be continued education on length, strength, and control, and then there'll be reflections for all three. Please stay involved in these. Drop how you're feeling, what comes up, aha moments. Let me know what you're learning. I can only meet you where you're at. So let me know in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's see what you learned. And I can't wait to see you in the next video.